Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we're going to be doing another Deepcore Galactic build list. This is for the Deepcore GK2. We're going to be going over all the overclocks for this weapon, and I'm going to be explaining the builds that I use for them. These may not be the most well optimized builds, these are just simply the builds that I use, and certain overclocks I definitely use more often than others. So our first clean overclock is compact ammo. This gives you 5 more magazine size and 30% recoil reduction, both of which are really good, and you can really run whatever you want with this because it's just a bonus. My usual build for the assault rifle is going with gyro stabilization for no base spread so that the first shot out of my gun will always hit, or at least always be where I'm aiming at. Maybe not always hit, but always be where I'm aiming at. I go with expanded ammo bags just for extra ammo. I usually go with high capacity magazine, although with this we already are getting a larger magazine, so either of these other two work pretty well too. Tier 4 I usually go with hollow point bullets so that I do more damage, at least when I'm hitting something in the weak spot, and then I usually go with stun. This is the usual build that I run with this, at least for general purpose because it works well against everything. You could switch it up though if you want more damage per second. You could also go with something like supercharged feed mechanism and keep this the same, or you could go with improved gas system to have even more damage per second, or you could go with hardened rounds. That works really well too. Our second overclock is gas rerouting. This gives us more rate of fire and cuts down on our reload time. We already have a pretty fast reload with the assault rifle, so this makes it even quicker, which is always a nice thing. Once again, you can go with the same build that I showed, going with something like this. That works really well with this, and you'll just get a little bit more of a bonus because you'll have a slightly faster rate of fire and a slightly faster reload. You could go even higher rate of fire if you wanted, going with this build as well, or switching over to something like Battle Frenzy if you want to have even more movement speed, so you can be moving really fast and shooting really fast. Or if you wanted maybe some recoil reduction and some armor damage, you could go with something like this. And then maybe Battle Cool if you want to have your spread come out. There's a lot of ways that you could build this. Alright, now moving on to some of the overclocks that actually change the way that the assault rifle works. And first up we got Homebrew Powder. Homebrew Powder makes it so we kind of randomize our damage. Now it'll show on this calculator that we actually will do statistically more damage, and that is true. We will generally do more damage, but it does mess with our breakpoints because 15 damage base is a really nice breakpoint, since that's exactly the amount of damage that you want to have to kill things like swarmers. If you low roll that, then you can't body shot them, which can be really annoying. It's really bad to be using up 2 bullets for a swarmer. Especially if there's a whole bunch of them coming at you and you're just spraying into the wave, that can be a problem. So in Tier 1, I still usually go with the gyro stabilization just so that I'm more accurate, but the supercharged feed mechanism works really well with this too. In Tier 2, now I go with the increased caliber rounds. This makes it so it's less likely to low roll, but I believe you still can low roll with this, and I don't really care for that, but this makes it so we're a bit more consistent. In Tier 3, I usually go with the improved propellant because this makes it so we can't low roll against things like swarmers. So now we will statistically be doing more damage against everything, and we can still hit those breakpoints. So we can kill things like grunts a little bit quicker, or Praetorians a little bit faster than we normally would. Alternatively, you could also go with hollow point rounds instead of the improved propellant and go with something like high capacity magazines. This still can, I believe you have a very low chance, but you do have a chance of low rolling towards swarmers. So this isn't too bad if you do it this way, but this can make it so you're doing a bit more damage towards things like grunts and special enemies like web and acid spitters. So if you want to go with this, you can. If you want more of a general loadout, I'd recommend going with the hardened rounds. This way it's not as punishing if you don't hit weak spots, so you can just fire at the body. The improved gas system also works here. And then any of the Tier 5s work fine. I still usually go with stun, just so that I can stun enemies and then spray them down a bit faster. If I'm running the Homebrew Powder, although I usually don't run Homebrew Powder all that much with the assault rifle. This is an overclock that I don't use very often, so my knowledge of it is very limited. The only real difference is either I go with this if I want to be more consistent, or this if I want to try to go for more of the weak spots. Next we have our balanced overclocks, and our first one is Overclocked Feed Mechanism. This doubles our recoil, but it gives us 3 more rate of fire. Now we can either work towards negating that recoil, or we can embrace it and go for even more damage per second. The recoil on the assault rifle is honestly not all that bad to control. It has pretty minimal recoil. Even with doubling its recoil, it's still not that bad. So I usually just continue on with the recoil, but if you don't want that, I would definitely recommend in Tier 3 going with Floating Barrel, because this will reset your recoil back down to normal, and then after that you can build the assault rifle however you would like. The usual way that I build this, though, is supercharged feed mechanism to have even higher rate of fire, more ammunition, extended magazine, improved gas system. This way it pretty much doubles our rate of fire, so this makes our gun... It does chew through ammo very fast, but you can mow through enemies incredibly quick and apply a lot of pressure to large enemies like dreadnoughts. And then in tier 5, I usually go with the battle cool for this one, just so that I can constantly kind of reset my spread so that my next bullets aren't as inaccurate as the ones previous. This is pretty easy to use in crowds because you can go from one grunt to another and just keep resetting. That's why I like this one, but the other two tier 5s are also really good. If you can stun an enemy, it's very easy to just stand right next to it and empty the whole clip into it. So you have a couple options with this one. This is the way that I usually like to build it. If you want a more general purpose way to build it, I would recommend going with the gyro stabilization, going with extra ammo, going with the floating barrel to reset our recoil. You can then go with any of the tier 4s. All of them are good. I would probably go with the hollow point rounds, and then I'd probably still go with stun and build like this. Our next overclock is Bullets of Mercy. Bullets of Mercy gives us increased damage so long as the target is under the effect of a status. That can be any status effect, whether that be stunning, freezing, fire, poison, but this only comes with the cost of our magazine size. There's an extremely high chance that enemies will almost always be under a status effect in this game because it's very unlikely that you're going to be running into other classes that are running something like maybe they're all running Bullets of Mercy Scout or something. That would be very unlikely. It's pretty common for somebody to be running flamethrower, cryo cannon, poison rounds, something like that in your games. So Bullets of Mercy is generally just a bonus in terms of damage. And the way that I usually build this is going with either of the tier 1s. Both are good in this case. I think I usually go with supercharged feed mechanism a little bit more often. Going with extra ammo, taking the high capacity magazines just to even out my magazine. And then in tier 4, I usually go with hardened rounds with this one because this does a little bit more damage towards Praetorians, Dreadnoughts, things like that that can be easily status affected, and then you can focus them down a little bit more, so the hardened rounds help me out a little bit more in this case, but something like hollow point rounds also works really well. And then in tier 5, I still usually go with the stun. This way, my assault rifle can also trigger what Bullets of Mercy is strong against. Moving on to our unstable overclocks, we have AI Stabilization Engine. This one is probably one of my favorites. We have 0 recoil with this. We have an extreme amount of spread recovery, meaning that our bullets pretty much go exactly where we want, and we do bonus weak spot damage. But we lose out on direct damage and we lose out on rate of fire. So we definitely want to make up for the direct damage because, again, we want to hit that 15 breakpoint. So in tier 1, there's no reason to take gyro stabilization because our gun is already super accurate. This is not going to help all that much. Going with the supercharged feed mechanism is definitely going to help because it's going to reset our rate of fire back to normal. In tier 2, I'm going to go with increased caliber rounds. This just makes it so we hit that nice 15 breakpoint so that we can kill swarmers much easier. So in tier 3, we have 2 pretty good options and 1 option that does nothing. Don't take floating barrel because you don't get any benefit from it whatsoever. Your overclock already gives you that bonus. So whatever you do, don't take this one. I usually go with the high capacity magazine, although increasing damage is also okay if you want that. In tier 4, I usually go with hollow point rounds. This is so that we get even more damage on weak spots. So we're doing 70% more damage to the weak spots. Although hardened rounds and improved gas system is also really good. And then in tier 5, I usually go with the stun. However, Battle Frenzy is also pretty good. I would not recommend going with Battle Cool because it's kind of redundant on this particular overclock. So one of these 2 I'd recommend. This allows you to pick off enemies at a very long range. As long as you can see an enemy, you can hit it with the assault rifle. In this case, your gun is just so accurate that you don't have to worry about compensating for the spread or the recoil or anything like that. And then our last overclock is Electrifying Reload. This is another overclock that I don't use very much because I don't really like the way that it works. But the way that I usually build it is kind of compensating for some of these because even though the damage is mostly going to come from the electricity that I'm putting on enemies, I still want to hit that 15 breakpoint so that I can kill things like swarmers because that can be really annoying if that's not happening. So in tier 1, I usually go with gyro stabilization just so that I can hit enemies a little bit easier. In tier 2, I go with increased caliber rounds so I can hit that 15 damage. Tier 3, I will sometimes switch between the recoil reduction or the high capacity magazines just so that we can make up in the loss of magazine size, although it's not needed in this one because the electricity is going to be doing most of the damage for us. So floating barrel also works really well here. In tier 4, I usually go with hardened rounds just so that I can break armor easier on enemies. and then the electricity can do more of its job. I don't find that hollow point rounds helps all that much with this one, although you could run it if you want. And same with improved gas system. I just find hardened rounds a bit more useful in my case. And then in tier 5, I usually still run stun, just so that I can have even more status effects on top of the electricity. This is usually how I run electrifying reload, but I don't use electrifying reload all that often. So I'm less familiar with this one, and I'm less familiar with the Homebrew Powder, simply because I don't use them as much as I use the rest of the Overclocks. So these were all my builds for the GK2. Hopefully this helped you out. If you guys are new here and you enjoyed this video, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post these. Special thanks to all the supporters of the channel. I really do appreciate that. If you'd like your name up here on this list, be sure to check out the links in the description to the YouTube member program and to my Patreon. If you'd like to see my other Deepcore Galactic build videos, be sure to click over here on this video. That'll take you to a list full of them. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you next time. Bye!